I've previously shown my video rig for the Nikon Z6, and this rig is going to be based on similar and some of the same components I used with that rig. Again, I chose a SmallRig cage. SmallRig were, to my knowledge, the first to design a cage specifically for the Z9, product number 3195. It's been sitting on my workbench for over a month, awaiting the arrival of the Z9, which finally turned up at the local camera store where I ordered it last week. Hallelujah! Full disclosure, SmallRig sent me this item to review. I can keep it, but no other perks apply. This isn't a sponsored video. My opinions are my own, and SmallRig won't vet my conclusions. As I say, I've set this rig up much like my other Z6 rig. The big difference here is that due to the Z9's extensive internal recording options, I don't necessarily need the external recorder. The Atomos Ninja 5 that I used with the Z6 to open up 10-bit ProRes, and if I were to send the Z6 in for the factory update, ProRes RAW. Out of the box, the Z9 has enabled internal ProRes 422 and HEVC H265 10-bit recording, and of course 8K HEVC recording. And a firmware update sometime in 2022 will bring 12-bit RAW 8K 60p, 12-bit RAW ProRes RAW HQ, and NRAW internal recording as well. The only real reason to add the Ninja or other device would be for monitoring and advanced exposure tools, which incidentally I hope Nikon will add to the Z9 in due course. I've certainly added my request for things like false color and waveforms. The more recent Ninja V Plus records 8K, and I presume will work with the Z9. The official list of supported cameras includes the previous Z6, Z7, first and second generation cameras, but of course they don't shoot 8K video. I reached out to Atomos, and their answer was that the Z9 is not on our supported cameras list, which means that it has not been officially tested by Atomos yet. However, they said, if the Z9 has clean output, which it does, it should work with Atomos devices. Okay, so back to the cage. It does come, as I noted in my last video, in 4 parts, so some assembly is required. A base with the usual 1/4-20 screw that attaches to the tripod socket, and a locking screw that takes advantage of the second threaded hole on the base of the Z9, a top and 2 sides. And I suggest identifying and laying them out as I did, assembling tools and the 8 screws that come with the kit. And this will take some of the pain out of what can be, I'm not going to sugarcoat, what is a bit of a fiddly job. But then again, maybe you're not so much of a fumble fingers as me. Really, it's not so bad. Once you find that tiny screw you dropped on the floor, look under the fridge. There's been some online criticism as to the stability of this cage. I don't know how this could have been designed as a one-piece cage like the one for the Z6, but SmallRig took advantage of that locking thread on the base of the Z9 to combat lateral twisting. And like the Z6 cage, there's another attachment point that takes advantage of the camera strap eyelet. SmallRig instructions ask you to remove the triangular ring on the right side of the camera, that's the right from the rear view, to accommodate this. And as I demonstrated in the Z6 rig video, it's not that difficult to remove, so that the cage, which has a little threaded hole on the corresponding side, can be further stabilized. The cage comes with a labeled M2.5 screw threaded into the side of that section that you use to pass through the strap mount and into the threaded hole on the cage. Cinched up, that attaches the cage solidly enough. With a top handle attached, it all looks and feels very secure to me. I suspect that criticism is coming from people who neglected to follow the instruction to use this third point of stabilization. Perhaps that's understandable, since the box comes without instructions, but a quick look at the product page on SmallRig's website should suffice to illustrate proper assembly and installation. Admittedly, I had some time to research how I was going to set up the Z9 rig. And I know I wasn't alone in wondering, since the Z9 is much different to other mirrorless cameras and the previous Z offerings in particular, I had to figure out how I was going to attach the components that were mounted on the rear section of the 12-inch rails I was using for the previous rig. And my SmallRig contact was kind enough to answer my many questions. The Z6, Z7, Z6 II and Z7 II, of course, lack the vertical grip of the Z9. The extra, what should we call it, camera edge of the Z9 lifts everything above the base plate by several centimeters. So SmallRig has threaded the bottom front plate to take a rail block, number 942, so you can add rails to the front for lens support, follow focus, and anything else that you need up front. And you can vary the length of the rails according to needs. I'm using the 4-inch here for this 85mm lens. Then, as I'm doing here, you can still use the 15mm rail support system base plate, 2272, with a second set of rails for the rear components. So I can still mount my external recorder, the Tascam DR6D Mark II, and the V-mount sled and battery. And here's where things diverge a bit for the Z9 camera. Ideally, I'd like to power everything from the V-mount battery, as I showed in the third part of my Z6 rig series. And there I used a dummy battery from the 8-volt outlet on the battery sled, but the Z9 can be powered via USB-C. There's a USB-C input on the camera. But I don't have a V-mount battery with the USB-C output, and to be honest, I'm a lot hesitant to plug the Z9 into any old thing without being sure it's voltage regulated. I've reached out to Nikon and other photographers I know are using V-mount to power their Z9s, to no avail. So if you're powering your Z9 with a V-mount battery, I'd love to hear your solution. Let me know in the comments below what you're doing. But what I do know for sure is the Z9 can be safely powered by various power banks, like the Anker PowerCore series. Of course, the Z9's EN-EL18D battery is much more powerful and long-lasting than the Z6's EN-EL15, and I'm awaiting my spare. Though I haven't tested the EN-EL18 to depletion, we want to be able to power the camera outside of whatever that limit is for, say, video or long exposure and time-lapse. Likewise, I haven't run the Anker down in any controlled test. The EN-EL18D is 10.8 volt with 3300 milliamp hour capacity. So I'm confident that the Anker's 20,000 milliamp hour capacity and 20 watt power delivery will suffice. There are, of course, higher capacity units as well. So, at least for the time being, this will be my auxiliary power solution for the Z9. As with my original Z6 rig tutorial, before I added the V-mount, I powered the Tascam recorder with a smaller Anker unit and used the SmallRig power bank holder, and that's now pressed into service for this rig. Unlike the Z6 cage, the Z cage does not have a built-in NATO rail on the left-hand side. So if you want a quick release side handle, that can be added with an accessory NATO rail. Otherwise, there are various screw-on options. SmallRig has showcased a new, very attractive rotating NATO side handle with a Z9 cage, which I'd be more than happy to review. It looks to be perfect for the kind of run-and-gun rig that the Z9 is perfect for, and more on that later. But this cage is designed to be adaptable, whether used handheld, tripod mounted, or with a stabilizer. For instance, 1/4-20 threaded holes on this rig allow for mounting the DJI RS2 and RSC2, I think it is, quick release plate with 2 1/4-inch screws. The cage features multiple 1/4-20 threaded holes, ARRI 3/8-16 locating hole. It comes with a cold shoe on the top, which I've got the mic on here. The bottom has an integrated Arca Swiss plate, and in my case this means I slipped the cage right onto the base plate without use of the Arca Swiss plate that came with that. The cage features all-around protective rubber pads inside to prevent scratches and a built-in magnetic slotted screwdriver and Allen wrench. Incidentally, I know some people have had this question, and I did initially. To get rid of overlays when monitoring or recording with the Ninja, Setup menu, HDMI, Output, Shooting Info, off. Just a little aside there. The Z9 features a full-size HDMI input. It's even more stable than the mini input on the Z6. Okay, let's talk about audio. The Z9 boasts 24-bit audio recording compared to previous models' 16-bit. Whether this will be an audible difference, I don't know. Evidently, the preamps are the same. Perhaps I'll do some testing. But depending on circumstances, I'll usually record audio in 3 different ways, or combinations thereof. Recording externally with a shotgun mic, like I have here, into the Tascam DR60D Mark II. Recording externally, again into the Tascam using the Rode Wireless Go system. Recording in camera using the Rode Wireless Go system. Occasionally I'll add the Rode Stereo Video Mic Pro, again recording into the camera. So those considerations affect how the rig is kitted out. First, if the external recorder is mounted on the rig at all, sometimes I'll carry it in the location kit I made if I'm using the Wireless Go. For run and gun, obviously, I'll try to keep things as minimalist as possible and most often record into the camera. For better or worse, that's what I'm doing in this video, as I did in the last of the rig series, recording into the Z6, right here, so I can show you the rig fitted out with the recorder, the whole shebang. Again, maybe I'll do some comparison testing at some point. But before I get too sidetracked, you can see these 8-inch rails, chosen for the rear, give plenty of space for the recorder, including room for the LCD folded out and the battery plate. And as you can see, we're still relying on the V-mount to power the Tascam and the Ninja, using the USB port for the recorder and D-tap to the Ninja's battery replacement module, D-tap to locking DC cable. Rather than repeating the assembly demonstrations in this video, I'll list the last one above and a whole series at the end of the video. Is it that way or that way? But you can see, I hope, that this cage and the accessory rail block are well adapted to the Z9's exotic design. There's no substance to assumptions made by people based on photos that this solution is insubstantial. It's absolutely solid. Beyond anything you'd want to hang on the front, short of the kitchen sink, although, I don't know, maybe it would hold the kitchen sink. Again, make sure to use that third point of stabilization, and I'm confident you'll find this is a solid unit. The tolerances are well engineered. Some people have said that it would have been nice to include an Arca Swiss dovetail on the vertical, obviating the need for an additional plate for portrait orientation. And initially I agreed, but there's plenty of threaded holes there all around this. So, as you've seen, that's where I've added the NATO rail for the side handle. But it's not a big deal really to switch that out for an Arca Swiss plate if I press the cage into use as a kind of L bracket. Keeping in mind that if you don't need a full cage, SmallRig has released their version of an L bracket. Before I forget, the Z9 is indeed suited to run and gun without sacrificing image quality due to the aforementioned internal recording options. So, despite the increased weight over the previous Z cameras, the Z9 is 1,340 grams with battery and cards versus 675 grams with a battery and memory card for the Z6. This rig is really nice, just enough weight to act as stabilization without becoming a big drag. The cage itself weighs around 272 grams, give or take. Top and side handle, that'll add about 350 grams. So if you forego a monitor and the rest of the peripherals I have for this tripod mounted rig, you could assemble a handheld somewhere around 1962 grams, 4.3 pounds. I'm going to be using the Z9 in all its guises. Going forward, it is after all a very versatile machine, and I'll include a list of parts in the description below, with affiliate links, so I'll receive a small commission if you buy via those at no cost to you. And there's a special 5% discount for my Canadian viewers, courtesy SmallRig, via the Amazon links. Well, I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please give it the old thumbs up, and if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please do. Hit that notification bell to stay up on new content. In the meantime, here's more video rig tutorials. Take care of yourselves. Cheers, and we'll see you later.